Goals. What's the goal of a God search? What is the goal? Where are you headed? What are you supposed to achieve? What's the end result? Who's the goalie? Who's the goalie? Religions are always fighting. We have the goalie. You have the goalie. I have the goalie. Here's the goal. This is my goal. This is your goal. This is your goalie. This is my goalie. It's a dangerous mess. Hi, this is Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. This is podcast number 28. We have been, if you've been following us, we have been pulling apart the dynamics of this amazing spiritual, I guess you could call it a concept, but it's really an amazing spiritual vehicle by which we can learn to become aligned to how life works for good, how life is designed, how it's ordered for good. That is, to have the experience called God. And we've been talking about this a lot in the past couple of sessions in order to understand the multiplicity of the different levels and dynamic components that are part of this amazing spiritual experience called God. And we talked about it having a spiritual component, about it having a moral component, a legal component, a historical component, meaning you're living not just in the present tense, but for the future. And we even talked about it on the most rarefied level of it having a cosmic component. What's important is that a covenant is massive. It is not just for you alone. It's for yourself and another, all others, future generations, all life in creation. And it has to continuously grow and continuously improve. And if you don't mind this word, I keep saying that, but we'll come back to the full discussion on it, evolve. Now, the experience of covenant, in order to engage it, is personal for you out there, because what we're doing here is we're teaching you in an American culture how to use your free will and how to use your conscience to realign aspects of your life to the kind of grid that exists here. There is a grid, it's invisible, it's a kind of template that is built into the relationships that compose the reality we all experience. And as you align yourself to it, you will discover that increasingly things go more fluidly, more harmoniously, more beautifully, sometimes magically, sometimes shockingly, miraculously. But all of that has to do with the alignment of your particular nature as an individual with the larger structure, template, a circuitry. That's the term that I really like. Circuitry that reality has. So that the more you are working along with it, the more it works along with you. That's the foundational experience to covenant. And the rest are different dynamics that include different aspects of life, some of which are very, very messy, such as politics. You'll be witnessing that today in Ukraine. If you look at the news, you'll be witnessing that today in Israel. If you look at the news, it's a mess. Now, let's talk about a little bit of this mess, because we're going to begin to talk more about the spiritual dynamics of covenant and what you will experience on a day-to-day basis and how to approach this in the next couple of podcasts. But it's very important now to return to a subject matter that we handled at the very beginning. A lot of people out there have walked away from the religion of their birth because the religion of their birth was not whole. They sensed it. They sensed there was something wrong with what they were taught. And they were much too intelligent and definitely much too sensitive to put up with something which was intrinsically false. It just was false. you know. So to those people who are out there, they are very, very stigmatized by the R word, religion, and many of you have gone to the S word, which is spirituality. But I'd like to now get very, very clear about covenant because it is a magnificent experience. And what goes awry that makes it so very impossible sometimes for people to experience the miraculousness of their own religion. And I'm not recommending, by the way, that you stay with your own religion. I think there are great advantages of that. We will talk about that because there is such a thing as breeding, and knowledge can be bred, okay, from mother to father to children. So there is great advantage to staying within the lineage that you were born. But sometimes that's not possible, and you have to leave and find a different lineage. Later on, some people integrate that in their original lineage, or the new original lineage will grow and become something else. This is the history of life. This is the history of religion. But let me deal with where covenant goes awry. As I said, it's a magnificent experience where your increased alignment to yourself as a human being and all of those other different dynamics, those were all relationship priorities. We discussed them. You experience increased health, increased peace, increased freedom and wisdom. You notice your full potential is opening up, and kind of life is bringing you doorways, opportunities that come to you for the expression of yourself. This is part of the covenantal experience. It's where God, meaning the experience called God, goodness from life, opens its doors and says, welcome, welcome. You know, you were Dorothy before. Everything was black and white in Kansas, with apologies, by the way, to that fair state. And now you're in Munchkin Land, where you can let out your talents as a child. By the way, do go to yourgodsearch.com. There are some books in the publication, including a nice little book called Soul Lessons from the Wizard of Oz. It's an extremely powerful story with great spiritual knowledge in it. You might enjoy the book. So here you have people who want to experience this incredible transition from Kansas to Technicolor, Oz. And they can't do it because there are things that are getting in the way. What is getting in the way? The problem is fixed ideational systems. Fixed ideational systems. We are living in a beautiful, evolving, progressing reality. We go from one moment to the next, and we can, if we're scrupulous and we are exacting in our spiritual path, we can experience a stepwise 1 foot followed by the next foot, followed by the next foot, next foot progression where we see ourselves growing in a very orderly, beautiful, orderly fashion. And that is a beautiful thing. However, when that orderliness takes a leap where the goal of that process becomes absolutely cemented, no wiggle room, absolute fixity of thought, fixity of heart, fixity of actions. So there is none of the delicious playfulness and flexibility that is part of the design of this world. What you have is a fixed ideational system. Now, it doesn't make a difference what the goal is. It can be an American goal where the whole world is democratic and every nation in the world is a state that's part of the United States. We didn't pull that off. We added in Hawaii, we added in Alaska, we're still wobbling on Puerto Rico, but it was a great vision. And from that inspired the United Nations, the League of Nations, the United Nations, the European Community. And there are other mergings of states that are taking place from that wonderful fixed goal. It's a great goal, but the fixity of it requires a rigidity and a cultic idealism that is extremely dangerous to an authentic, holistic experience of covenant. It's a fixed ideational system. I'm not a psychiatrist, but that's a pretty common phrase. If you're a psychiatrist, call one up and they'll talk to you about it. It is, from a religious point of view, idolatry, which we talked about in podcast number 1 because it was that critical. It's where the human being thinks up something and it is so perfectly thought out and so completely rigid that they don't wobble. Now, it can be the American dream. It could be the dream of China that the state is the mediator of all truth. It's a highly questionable idea, but it is an idea that's been in place since the Treaty of Westphalia, when nations decided to give themselves sovereignty as if they had rights of individuals. And its nation state is a pretty tricky kind of philosophical political construct that people consider to be fixed, a goal, a rigid goal, and our sovereignty is the goal. Well, it gets into trouble. It can be communism, it can be socialism, we've spoken to that. It can be cultic cisgenderism, okay, cultic marriages, um, difficult to defend because there are, intermediate genders and there are intermediate sexual states in people. There are hermaphroditism in the human species, not complete at all. No one can reproduce by themselves, but it's not fixed and rigid so that there's never anything in between. Although it's dominant male and dominant female, there are some hermaphroditic people who are born, which shows you that we're not dealing with a fixed, rigid system. Otherwise, that wouldn't exist. The same thing happens with genders and sexual diversities. That there are other fixed ideational processes that are very, very religious. The Messiah. Now, is there going to be a Messiah? What is the Messiah? Is the Messiah a human being? Centuries ago, the Messiah was considered to be a warrior king, bringing back the Davidic monarchy. Then it was reconceptualized by mystical rabbis and also by Christianity, which, because of the tremendous inspiration of Jesus, began to conceive of the Messiah as an incredibly holy being that will be returning. And I'm not saying no to any of this stuff, by the way, to any of these ideas. Let me come back. I am not degrading these ideas. I'm qualifying the ideas. So let me just continue here. So there is the fixed ideational system of a rigid Christianity, let's say a rigid Catholicism, and then that rigidity did not work when it was missing certain aspects of human conscience, and it created a heresy called the Protestant Church. And then the Protestant Church had certain fixities of itself, like Calvinism, which we had in America, where the idea of the elect was fixed. And if you had money, it meant God loved you, and therefore you had preferential providential status relative to someone who didn't. That's a fixed thing. Oh, there's a certain amount of truth to it. If you explore your covenant relationship and you begin to experience spirituality, you'll notice that there is a relationship between prosperity and wealth, including money, and spiritual advancement. It's as old as Solomon. It is an ancient observance. But when it becomes fixed, and it becomes a rule by which you can judge one person right and one person not right, or what is higher and what is lower, and it's fixed and it doesn't work, well, you got a problem. And in fact, you have a real problem. You can't even, if you were back in ancient times, you can't admit that Jonathan, the son of Saul, King Saul, would ever take over the kingdom and permit David, who was an alien to that family, to come in and take the throne, because they were so fixed and rigid on the idea of the firstborn that it wasn't possible. So there are other fixed things, cultism, that such as Jonestown, cultism, that where a leader becomes the goal, following one particular leader to death becomes the goal. These are all the same things. And what happens is you have certain kinds of group ego that comes into play. You have beliefs that are treated as truth and followed as truth, when beliefs can be true within the larger truth, which, as we said earlier, is part of the nature of the God experience, and it's bigger than anything. You have beliefs about what is good that, well, they're only minor aspects of what is good. You can have a belief that it is absolutely good not to steal until you live in a society where they render getting a loaf of bread impossible with a profane economic system. And then you realize that view of good is incomplete. So you must be very, very careful when you embark on covenant on this show, Godsearch, to be very careful about fixed ideational systems, any fixed ideational systems. If I tell you you will experience good, that does not mean in the path that you experience good, that there will not be unpleasant experiences, that there will not be challenges that are really deep and even might even deal with sickness. But increasingly, when you get on a God search, you're going to notice that even when these things happen, you will begin to discern the purposefulness in them. You'll discern that they're teaching you. And the most remarkable thing about it, as you continue with your God search, is that by discerning the meaning of these events, the negative experiences cease to be attacks against you. They cease to be enemies, enemies. They are more hands, an aspect of the hand of God, a life experience that, however unpleasant, is there to teach you something you were not aware of. You're learning it the hard way, because when you analyze it, you'll begin to notice you were avoiding the problem all along, and it just built up a certain critical mass, and it was unpleasant. So there is a kind of dangerous formal unity, a formal truth, and a formal idea of good, meaning our idea of unity, our idea of truth, our idea of good, that is held to be fixed as an end goal and even a goalie, you know, that whether the goalie is Buddha returning, or the goalie is the relationship of Muhammad in the final coming. All of these fixed things become formal aspects of God, meaning they're human. But how they weave together has to weave together with the entirety of life and the entirety of creation, which is so much more than any one mere human being can possibly know. Therefore, if we in devotion are devoted to a fixed idea, such as bringing back the Messiah, that's an important thing. That's great. But when it becomes a fixation, and what happens is you do not trust other people who do not have that, or you use that as a weapon against people, or you have a belief that you will create the resurrection of a caliphate, an Islamic caliphate as the structure to the entire world, or that the structure of the entire world will be a Semitic kingdom like Solomon created, or a Roman like kingdom such as that which the Catholic or Western Church of Christianity had in its mind. When you have these things so fixed that there is no wiggle room, no plasticity, no room for creativity from the source of it all, well, that fixity usually causes things to collapse. And this is as true for religion as it is for how you approach your Wall Street investments and how you approach your family and how you teach your teenagers. Any of these fixed ideas which become fixed goals without discernment and wiggle room, even plasticity to adjust for different ways of thinking and different nuances of who people are. They all of these fixed ideational systems will reach a certain point and then they collapse. Now, that's very reassuring because no matter how bad things go, you can be certain if anyone has a fixed ideational system in their religious thinking or in their policy thinking, in their government thinking, in their sexual thinking, in their marital thinking, in their educational system, you can be certain the fact that it is that fixed, it will only go so far before it, begins to wobble and requires modification, and it needs to be, reinvented. Okay, and that's what's, of course, happening between the blue team and the red team. The blue team is requiring the red team to open up and include diversity, and the red team is saying too much diversity. We need a very important spine to this country. I think they both have important things to say, but our minds are so completely split in a warlike way, in a mental crack, that we can't hear the truth that's in the other person. This is a sickness. It's a spiritual sickness. It will prevent a true, authentic God search. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be a really excellent and powerful religion, right? A very powerful political view, because you're going to put forth your view, rah, 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 rah. Okay, and you'll have that kind of, thumping, Bible thumping or political party thumping, and people like that kind of noise and they think it's powerful. Be very careful. The distinction is between an ideal and idealism. Be very careful. You need the ideal of male and female marrying and having children. You cannot have society without it. But when it becomes idealism, which excludes the diversity within nature, it becomes excessive and dangerous. If, on the other hand, you have so much plasticity to gender and so much plasticity to sex that core relationships that are necessary for species, for solid, strong familial and societal structure gets undermined, then that becomes a problem. It doesn't make a difference which viewpoint. Excess to any ideal will create idealism, and the idealism is so fixed it becomes an idolatrous thinking process, and it will undermine itself and its own goals. And that's what happened, as we talked about in podcast 8, where the 60s went to its extreme, where it became not about consciousness expansion, but about drug, sex, rock and roll. And then a neo-biblical resurgence took place, in the United States with an active evangelical community to begin to put back the moral and legal spine that the 60s had torn down too much. So we don't want to keep going around in circles. We're here on a God search. We don't want to get lost in all of these goal issues. Covenant is magnificent. It's a magnificent experience that will enhance your life and give you truly the closest thing to proof you can about God being good, God being unified, God being true, and that your own use of your gift of cause and effect, of causality itself, which you get by virtue of the fact that you're in a world designed by a creative force. Um, you'll begin to master these talents that you have, and that's the closest thing you can get to proof of God, at least on Godsearch. There are other things we can do, but it's a little bit more advanced and it's not for this show. But be very, very, very careful of taking your ideals and turning it into idealism. You will find, as a general rule, that wherever there is idealism, there is usually some kind of tremendous pain that a person is hiding from. Some kind of tremendous pain. The tremendous pain is in the person. They don't want to face it. And what they do is they project that pain into the future as a goal, okay, to try to achieve. And they get a fire and a fierceness to it. But what happens is the fire and the fierceness are there, but they are there in part to cover up the tremendous fear and the weakness that each person is feeling on the inside of them emotionally and psychologically. And the idealism is there to cover it up. This is part of the reason why we're having such tremendous political issues where Russia is imitating itself as the Soviet Union because it's afraid of being small. It's afraid of being dwarfed and being disregarded after the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's, of course, part of the reason Israel's fierceness is becoming debatable right now amongst many people. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm just saying it is debatable because the fierceness is there after being so beleaguered for over 2,000 years. The necessity to have solid, safe boundaries, which is everyone's right, has a kind of fixity to it. Not the goal of Zion, which is magnificent and to which, frankly, I do subscribe. I'm not hiding from it, but Zionism, where it is a cultic kind of fixity of an exact view of what must take place. Here, I'm not there. My experience of God in creation is that it's much more versatile and much more flexible, and that we have to approach a kind of living experience with life in order to begin to really possibly, reinstitute something as dramatic as a as the resurrection of a dead state after 2,000 years. All this goes into subject matters that are very, very deep. It would take us hours to do it. But the important thing is to not, I'm warning you now before we enter into the dynamics personally of covenant and how we begin the process of psychologically owning it and entering into a personal experience of covenant. Just be careful of the mistake of religion, the mistake of governments, and fixed ideational systems of all kinds. They will sidetrack you. Oh, you might feel a certain propulsion as you get going and a fierceness as you have this goal that you're trying to, the goal becomes to have the experience of God. But leave breathing room. Leave it. Leave breathing room, leave flexibility. Don't be so fixed in your own mind that you think you can predict everything. Do not take what I say 100% as truth. And as we know from podcast 1, because we're circling back from there, don't take anyone's view of truth 100%. You turn them into an idol, and idols collapse. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to begin to shift to more personal experiences. I will share some of my personal experiences with you. Go to yourgodsearch.com and, please look up the publications, reach out to me, and let's talk some more. That's a really good venue to ask questions. So don't feel free to ask questions. And I'll see you next time. Please uncover God, discover God, and for heaven's sakes, put aside all of these problems with goals and goalies and fixed ideational systems that have trapped people in very primitive and dangerous religious thinking. Put that aside and re-experience God in a fresh way, and then go where you need to go. All right. The God search experience is something that can renovate your life. It can renovate your government. It can renovate your religion. It can renovate your home, because that spiritual experience is fresh water running into a muddy stream. And that's what we want. So come on, meet you next week again, Wednesdays about 5:45 a.m. Eastern Daytime, the God Search. This is Michael Shevack. Thanks for coming today, and I'll see you again next week. God bless. Bye-bye.